The first sound Grace Ellis heard was laughter, sharp, careless laughter, cutting through the holy quiet of a Sunday morning church parking lot. She stood frozen with her purse clutched to her chest, while a man who once called her wife pointed at her shoes and asked loudly if life had finally finished her. People stared. Some whispered. Grace didn't cry. She only lifted her chin, because grace, real grace, learns when to be silent. But to understand how a woman like Grace ended up in that moment, humiliated yet unbroken, we must go back to where it all began. Before we continue, if you love deep, dramatic African stories filled with love, betrayal, and redemption, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us what part of the world you're watching from. Now, let's begin. Grace Ellis was the kind of woman people noticed without her ever trying. She lived in a quiet African city where Sundays were sacred and church bells dictated the rhythm of life. Every Sunday morning, Grace stood at the front of the church choir, dressed modestly, her natural hair neatly wrapped or braided, her face bare of makeup except for a soft glow that came from something deeper than skin. When Grace sang, the church didn't just listen, it felt. Her voice was honeyed and strong, carrying sorrow, hope, and faith in equal measure. Old women closed their eyes and whispered prayers. Men straightened in their seats. Children grew unusually quiet. It was said that when Grace sang, even heaven leaned closer. Grace was admired for many things. Her beauty, yes, but more than that, her devotion. She was never seen at the center of gossip. She stayed after service to help clean. She visited the sick. She tithed faithfully even when money was tight. To many, Grace was the definition of a good woman. And that was exactly what drew Marcus Cole to her. Marcus was everything Grace was not. He was charming in a loud way, ambitious in a restless way, and religious only when it benefited his image. He attended the same church, but his worship ended at the final amen. Marcus liked appearances. He liked to be seen. He liked people to think he was a good man. When Marcus first noticed Grace, it wasn't during prayer. It was during the choir's final song one Sunday, a slow, powerful hymn. Grace had a note that made something stir in him, but it wasn't reverence. It was desire, the kind that doesn't ask who a woman is, only what she can give. From that day, Marcus watched her. He asked about her from church members, learned her name, learned she was single, learned she lived alone and worked modestly. In his mind, Grace became a prize, beautiful, respected, untouched by scandal. The kind of woman that elevated a man's status just by standing beside him. But Marcus had no interest in her soul. What he wanted was possession. He wanted the satisfaction of being the man who took the church's golden girl home. He wanted access, not commitment. And deep down, he believed marriage was just another tool to get what he wanted. Grace, meanwhile, noticed Marcus only because he made himself impossible to ignore. He started sitting closer to the choir, offering rides home, sending friendly messages, complimenting her voice, her kindness, her faith. Grace was polite but cautious. She had seen men like Marcus before, smooth talkers with shallow intentions. When Marcus finally asked her out, Grace didn't blush or rush. She prayed, and when she agreed to meet him, it was with her guard fully up. Over their first few conversations, Marcus played his role well. He spoke of God, of values, of wanting a good woman. He listened when Grace talked about her dreams, her boundaries, her belief in marriage before intimacy. And Grace was very clear. I am not interested in dating for fun, she told him one evening, her voice calm but firm. If a man comes into my life, it must be with marriage in mind. I will not give myself to someone who is not ready to build a home. Marcus smiled. Inside, he laughed. But outwardly, he nodded, reached for her hand, and said the words she expected to hear. That's exactly what I want too. Marcus pursued Grace with precision. He became consistent, predictable. He attended midweek services, joined church activities. He prayed loudly and publicly. To the church, Marcus transformed into the ideal suitor, serious, respectful, God-fearing. People whispered approval. Grace is blessed. That man is serious. She finally found her husband. Grace took her time. She watched his actions. She tested his patience. She refused to be rushed into anything physical. And Marcus waited, not because he respected her, but because he believed the reward would be worth it. When he finally proposed, it was in front of church elders, with humility carefully performed. Grace cried that day, not because of excitement alone, but because she believed God had answered her prayers. The wedding was beautiful, simple but joyful. The church was full. Grace looked radiant in white, her smile pure, her heart hopeful. Marcus stood tall beside her, admired by men and envied by some. He had done it. He had won. But the truth about pretenders is this: they can only perform for so long. 1 month. That was all it took. 1 month into the marriage, Marcus changed. The affectionate husband disappeared. Conversations shortened. Compliments stopped. He came home late, found fault in Grace's cooking, her voice, her faith, her presence. He complained that she was too serious, too church-minded, not exciting enough. Grace was confused. She tried harder. She prayed more. She fasted. She asked what she had done wrong. Marcus responded with silence, then cruelty. He accused her of trapping him, of changing after marriage, of being a burden. He began sleeping away from home, ignoring her calls, avoiding her tears. Then one evening, without warning, he dropped the final blow. "I made a mistake marrying you." A month later, the divorce papers came. No counseling, no apology, no shame. And as if to salt the wound, Marcus didn't even wait. Within weeks, he was seen publicly with another woman, flashy, loud, unapologetic. Soon after, he married her too. Grace was left with nothing but memories, whispers, and a heart shattered by a man who never intended to love her. But what Marcus didn't know, what he could never imagine, was that the woman he broke would rise in ways his pride would never survive. And that is only the beginning. The divorce did not arrive with drama. It arrived quietly, folded inside a plain brown envelope, handed to Grace by a courier who did not know he was delivering the collapse of her world. Grace sat on the edge of the bed that afternoon, the papers trembling in her hands. The house was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock, a wedding gift from Marcus's aunt. She stared at the words, but could not read them at first. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with disbelief. 1 month. That was how long her marriage had survived. Marcus did not come home that night. He did not call. He did not explain. His lawyer did the speaking for him, cold words typed neatly, stating irreconcilable differences, as though love could be reduced to a line of ink. Grace went to church the following Sunday. She sat in her usual seat, but something had shifted. People glanced at her with questions in their eyes. Some looked away. Others whispered. Divorce was not common in their church, especially not for a woman like Grace, who had been lifted as an example of virtue. She sang that day, but her voice cracked for the first time anyone could remember. 2 weeks later, the rumors became truth. Marcus reappeared, not alone. He walked into a public restaurant holding hands with another woman, laughing loudly, unapologetic. She was tall, dressed in bright colors, nails long and sharp, hair sleek and expensive. Her laughter carried over tables like a declaration. Her name was Tanya. Grace heard about it before she saw it. Friends tried to soften the blow. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a distraction. But Marcus did not believe in discretion. He wanted to be seen. He wanted Grace to know she had been replaced. And then came the final humiliation. Barely weeks after the divorce was finalized, word spread that Marcus was marrying again. A wedding. Another one. Grace heard the news while standing in line at the market. A woman behind her said it casually, almost excitedly. "Did you hear? Marcus Cole is getting married again. That man doesn't waste time." Grace's knees buckled. She left her basket and walked out into the sun, her vision blurring. She leaned against a wall, gasping, as if her chest had been split open. Married again. So quickly that it was impossible to deny the truth. Marcus had never left her for someone new. He had left her for someone he already had. The church reacted in pieces. Some blamed Marcus quietly. Others blamed Grace loudly. A few elders suggested she pray harder next time. There were women who stopped greeting her altogether, as if divorce were contagious. Marcus moved on effortlessly. He posted photos. New house. New car. New wife smiling like she had won a prize. Tanya embraced the attention, soaking in the status of being Mrs. Cole. She wore it loudly. Grace, meanwhile, lost almost everything. The house they had shared belonged to Marcus. She was given 1 week to move out. 1 week to pack a marriage into boxes. She sold what little she could, gave away what she couldn't carry. On the final night, she sat on the bare floor of the empty living room and cried until dawn, deep, broken sobs that came from somewhere beyond language. By morning, Grace Ellis was homeless in everything but name. Rock bottom does not announce itself. It simply arrives one morning when you wake up and realize there is nowhere to go. Grace moved into a small room at the back of a distant cousin's apartment. The mattress was thin. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The walls were close enough to hear other people breathe. She owned 2 suitcases and a bag of clothes. That was it. For the first few weeks, Grace did not sing. She barely spoke. She woke up, went to work, came back, and stared at the wall until sleep claimed her. Food had no taste. Prayer felt heavy. Even church became painful. Too many memories, too many eyes. But something stubborn lived inside Grace. Even in her silence, she refused to die. One evening, after returning from work exhausted and numb, she caught her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her eyes were dull. Her shoulders slumped. Her spirit looked misplaced. And for the first time since the divorce, Grace felt anger. Not at Marcus. At herself. "I'm still alive," she whispered to the mirror. "So I will not disappear." That night, she made a decision. Grace began rebuilding her life the only way she knew how. Quietly, faithfully, one step at a time. She took extra shifts at work. Saved every spare coin. She updated her resume and applied for a better job, even when rejection emails piled up. She learned to budget ruthlessly, learned to stretch meals, learned to survive. There were days she cried in bathrooms, days she smiled at customers while her heart bled, days she questioned God, but she kept moving. Slowly, things began to change. She landed a new job, nothing glamorous but stable. It paid a little more, enough to breathe, enough to plan, enough to dream again, even if the dreams were small. She moved out of the cramped room into a modest studio apartment. 1 window, 1 table, 1 chair, but it was hers. The first night there, Grace knelt on the floor and cried, not from pain but relief. She returned to church, not to perform, not to impress, just to heal. She sat in the back at first. Let others sing, let others shine. But one Sunday, the choir director approached her gently. "We miss your voice," she said. Grace hesitated. Then she nodded. The first note she sang trembled. The second steadied. By the third, something old and familiar returned to her chest, a reminder that her gift had not been taken from her. The congregation noticed, not because Grace had become loud again, but because she had become strong. Her face changed. Her posture straightened. Her eyes regained light. She stopped explaining herself, stopped defending her past, stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. She no longer asked why Marcus left. She asked who she was becoming. Months passed. Grace built routines, peaceful mornings, honest friendships, private prayers. She learned to enjoy her own company, learned that love did not have to hurt to be real. And without realizing it, Grace Ellis, once abandoned, once humiliated, began to glow again. Not the glow of a woman being admired, but the glow of a woman who had survived. And somewhere ahead, unseen and unannounced, life was preparing to introduce her to a future that would make her past finally make sense. But that moment had not yet arrived. Grace did not go looking for love. Love, to her, had become a quiet thing, something handled carefully, like a fragile heirloom that could shatter if touched too soon. Her life was full enough now. She had peace, structure, and a growing sense of self that no longer depended on anyone's validation. So when she met Nathaniel Pierce, it was entirely unplanned. It happened on an ordinary weekday afternoon. Grace had stopped by a small community outreach center to volunteer, something she had started doing once a month since rebuilding her life. The center ran free health checks and counseling sessions for people who could not afford regular medical care. Grace usually helped with registration, paperwork, and guiding people where they needed to go. That day, a man stood by the reception desk looking lost. Not helpless, just unfamiliar with the space, as if he had stepped into a world he did not usually occupy. He wore simple clothes, neatly pressed but unremarkable. No flashy watch, no expensive shoes, just calm eyes and an air of quiet courtesy. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I'm supposed to be volunteering here today, but I think I'm early." Grace looked up and smiled. "You're right on time," she replied. They always say that. That was their first exchange. No sparks, no dramatic pause, just ease. Nathaniel was polite, reserved, and observant. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were thoughtful, never rushed. He asked questions, not the kind meant to impress, but the kind meant to understand. They worked side by side that afternoon. Grace noticed how gently he spoke to the elderly, how patiently he explained procedures, how he never once checked his phone or acted inconvenienced. There was no performance in him, no hunger for attention. When the day ended, Nathaniel thanked everyone and began to leave without ceremony. Grace surprised herself by stopping him. "You didn't sign the volunteer log," she said. He smiled sheepishly. "I knew I forgot something." As he wrote his name, Grace noticed his handwriting, careful, deliberate. "Nathaniel," she said aloud, "thank you for helping today." "The thanks is mine," he replied. "This place, it matters." They did not exchange numbers. They did not plan another meeting. But life, it seemed, had already decided. Over the next few weeks, Nathaniel began showing up again. Sometimes volunteering, sometimes just passing by to check on the center. Each time, he greeted Grace with the same gentle warmth. Their conversations deepened slowly. They spoke about faith, not loudly, not argumentatively, but honestly. They spoke about purpose, about disappointment, about finding meaning after loss. Grace never told him about Marcus. Nathaniel never spoke of his past. They met each other as they were, in the present. Grace felt safe, not excited in a dizzy way, not nervous in a desperate way. Safe in a grounded, unfamiliar way that made her breathe easier. One evening, as they walked out together, Nathaniel stopped. "Grace," he said, her name sounding deliberate on his lips. "May I ask you something?" She nodded. "Would you like to have dinner with me sometime?" No pressure, just conversation. Grace paused. Old instincts stirred. Old warnings whispered. But something inside her was calm. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." Their first dinner was simple. A quiet restaurant. Neutral conversation. Shared laughter that came easily. Nathaniel did not probe. He did not rush. He did not make promises. He was consistent. That was what stood out most. He called when he said he would. He showed up when he promised. He respected Grace's boundaries without questioning them. When she mentioned her faith, he didn't flinch or perform. He matched her sincerity with his own. Over time, Grace told him her story. Not all at once. Not with bitterness. Just truth. Nathaniel listened without interruption, without judgment. When she finished, he did not say, "I'm sorry that happened to you." He said, "I'm glad you survived it." Those words stayed with her. As months passed, their relationship deepened quietly. They prayed together, volunteered together, shared dreams cautiously, like people who had both learned the cost of hope. Grace noticed that Nathaniel lived modestly, almost surprisingly so. His apartment was clean, but simple. His car was functional, not impressive. He dressed well, but never extravagantly. She assumed he was comfortable, educated, maybe upper middle class. She never imagined the truth. The revelation came one afternoon when Grace accompanied him to a charity medical outreach event in another city. She thought he was just another volunteer. But when they arrived, people greeted Nathaniel differently. With respect, with deference. Board members approached him. Doctors consulted him. His presence seemed to shift the atmosphere subtly, like a current running beneath the surface. Grace pulled him aside, confused. "Nathaniel, what is going on?" He hesitated. Then he exhaled, as if setting down a weight. "There's something I should have told you earlier," he said gently. "I didn't want it to define how you saw me." And then he told her about the pharmaceutical empire, about the inheritance, about the billions, about the responsibility he carried quietly. about choosing humility over display. Grace said nothing for a long moment. Then she laughed, soft, disbelieving. So all this time, she said slowly, you were just normal on purpose? Nathaniel smiled. I wanted to be chosen for who I am, he said, not for what I have. Grace studied him, and in that moment, something settled inside her completely. This man was nothing like Marcus. There was no deception, no hunger, no insecurity masked as confidence. Nathaniel did not need to prove anything. Love, with him, felt dignified. A few months later, Nathaniel proposed. Not in public, not with spectacle, just the two of them, after prayer, with a ring chosen thoughtfully and words spoken carefully. I love you, he said. I respect you. And I want to build a life where neither of us ever has to shrink. Grace said yes. Their wedding was intimate and intentional. Family, close friends, faith at the center. No extravagance, just joy. Grace Ellis walked into that marriage whole. Not rescued, not dependent, chosen. And as she stood beside Nathaniel, her heart full and steady, she had no idea that her past, long quiet, was watching, waiting for the moment it would collide with her present. That moment had not come yet, but it was closer than she knew. 3 years. That was how long it had been since Grace Ellis signed her divorce papers. 3 years since the shame, the whispers, the nights she cried herself to sleep wondering what she had done wrong. Life had moved forward since then, quietly, steadily, but some scars, she knew, only revealed their healing when tested. That test came on a Sunday morning. The service had been beautiful. The choir sang with fire, and Grace stood among them. Not at the center, not hidden either, just present. Her voice was strong, her spirit calm. She wore a simple dress, neatly pressed, her hair wrapped in soft elegance. Nothing flashy, nothing desperate, just grace. After the final prayer, people filtered out into the sunlit parking lot, exchanging greetings and laughter. Grace stepped outside, purse over her arm, scanning for the familiar car she knew would arrive shortly. Then she heard it. A laugh. High, sharp, unmistakably mocking. Well, if it isn't Grace Ellis. Her body stilled. She turned slowly. Marcus Cole stood a few steps away, leaning against a sleek, expensive car. Time had not softened him. It had only polished his arrogance. Designer sunglasses, tailored suit, a smile that carried entitlement. Beside him stood Tanya. She was dressed loudly, from her heels to her handbag, every detail screaming wealth and attention. Her arm looped possessively through Marcus's, her eyes sweeping over Grace with open disdain. Grace felt the eyes of others turn toward them. This was not a private moment. This was a performance. Marcus looked Grace up and down deliberately. Wow, he said, clicking his tongue. Still keeping it modest, I see. Tanya laughed. Marcus, don't be mean. Some people like that simple life. Not everyone can upgrade. The words landed exactly as intended. A few people shifted uncomfortably. No one intervened. Grace felt the familiar urge rise, the instinct to explain, to defend, to shrink. But it passed just as quickly. She smiled. Good morning, Marcus. Tanya, she said evenly. I hope you enjoyed the service. Marcus scoffed. Service? Please. I just came to remind myself where I started. His eyes narrowed. So tell me, Grace, how's life been treating you? Tanya leaned closer, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You know, after the divorce, I really wondered how you'd manage. On your own. Things are hard these days. Marcus added casually. Still struggling? The word still was deliberate. Grace met his gaze calmly. My life is peaceful, she said. That's enough for me. Marcus laughed loudly. Peace doesn't pay bills. Tanya giggled. Or buy cars. Marcus gestured toward Grace's simple shoes. So how did you get here today? Bus. Or did someone from church give you a ride? The humiliation was thick now, hanging in the air like smoke. Grace felt it, but she did not absorb it. I have a ride, she said simply. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh, yes. Tanya smirked. From where? Your imagination. Marcus laughed again, shaking his head. Grace, you don't have to lie. There's no shame in being alone. Grace inhaled slowly. I'm not alone, she said. Right on cue, the low hum of an engine rolled through the parking lot. Not loud, not aggressive, controlled. A luxury car, sleek, unmistakably elite, glided in and came to a smooth stop near the church entrance. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Even Marcus stopped talking mid-sentence. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, composed, dressed in understated elegance that spoke to wealth without shouting it. His presence shifted the air, not because he demanded attention, but because authority followed him naturally. Grace's face softened instantly. There you are, the man said warmly. He crossed the short distance between them, eyes only for Grace, and kissed her forehead gently, an intimate, respectful gesture that said more than words ever could. Sorry I'm a few minutes late, my love. Grace smiled. You're right on time. Marcus stared. Tanya's mouth fell open. The man turned to them politely, offering a nod. Good morning. Grace took a small step forward. Marcus, she said calmly, this is my husband. The word husband landed like thunder. Marcus blinked. You're what? My husband, Grace repeated. Nathaniel. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Someone whispered a name, then another. Recognition spread quickly. That was when the atmosphere changed completely. People began murmuring louder now. Shock, awe, confusion. Nathaniel Pierce, the philanthropist, the billionaire heir, the man whose donations had funded hospitals, scholarships, entire community projects. The man Marcus had once dismissed as ordinary without realizing who he was looking at. Marcus's face drained of color. Tanya clutched his arm tighter. Marcus, who is that? Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. Nathaniel extended his hand calmly. Nice to meet you, he said. I've heard your name mentioned. Marcus hesitated before shaking it, his grip weak, uncertain. Oh, yes. Marcus, we were just talking. Nathaniel smiled slightly, not unkindly, but knowingly. I see. He turned to Grace. Ready to go? Grace nodded. As they walked toward the car together, the crowd parted instinctively. Eyes followed them. Whispers grew. The narrative shifted right there in the sunlight. Grace paused briefly and turned back. She met Marcus's gaze one last time. Not with triumph, not with anger, just truth. I hope you find peace, she said quietly. Then she got into the car. The door closed. The engine purred. And as the car pulled away, Marcus Cole stood frozen in the parking lot, exposed, diminished, while the woman he once discarded rode away with a dignity he could never buy. But this was not the end. For while Grace drove forward into her life, consequences were just beginning to circle Marcus, and they were far less gentle. The church parking lot did not forget what happened that Sunday. By Monday morning, the story had traveled far beyond the congregation. In a city where reputations were built and broken by whispers, Marcus Cole's name was suddenly attached to a new narrative, one he could not control. People talked. They talked about how he had mocked his ex-wife publicly. They talked about how wrong he had been. They talked about the man she married instead. And most painfully of all, they talked about him with pity. Marcus tried to brush it off at first. He told himself it didn't matter. He still had money, status, a beautiful wife, appearances. But cracks had already formed long before that Sunday. Grace's quiet dignity had simply shone light on him. His business had been bleeding for months. Poor decisions, inflated confidence, deals made on charm instead of substance. Marcus had always believed he was smarter than everyone else, that things would work out because they always had. They didn't. One investor pulled out, then another. A loan he had taken quietly came calling. Debts Marcus thought were buried resurfaced with interest and urgency. The bank stopped calling politely. Tanya noticed the shift almost immediately. The shopping slowed. The excuses increased. The temper sharpened. Marcus began coming home late again, not with the swagger of success, but with the bitterness of a man losing control. She asked questions. Marcus lied, but Tanya was not Grace. She did not pray quietly for understanding. She investigated. She checked accounts, spoke to lawyers, asked the questions Marcus never expected her to ask. What she found unsettled her deeply. hidden debts, exaggerated assets, stories that did not align. Then came the final blow. A formal notice arrived one afternoon, stamped and undeniable. Marcus's business was officially under review. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. The illusion collapsed in a single week. Tanya confronted him that night. "You told me we were secure," she said, her voice sharp with betrayal. "You told me you had everything handled." Marcus shouted, deflected, blamed the economy, blamed enemies, blamed Grace. That was when Tanya knew. A man who still blamed his ex-wife years later was not a man who took responsibility for anything. Within days, she packed her things. Within weeks, she filed for an annulment, citing misrepresentation and deceit. The headlines were not kind. Marcus Cole, once admired, once envied, became a cautionary tale. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. Friends distanced themselves. Respect evaporated. And in the quiet of his unraveling, Marcus remembered Grace. Her calm, her composure, her words in the parking lot. "I hope you find peace." The memory burned. Grace heard about Marcus's downfall the same way she heard about most things now, indirectly. A passing comment, a concerned friend, a prayer request whispered in church. She did not seek the information. She did not celebrate it either. By then, Grace's life had settled into a rhythm she cherished. Mornings filled with purpose, evenings filled with warmth. A marriage built on conversation, prayer, and mutual respect. Nathaniel never brought Marcus up. He did not need to. Grace, however, knew there was one thing left undone. Not revenge. Accountability. She reached out through her lawyer, requesting a formal meeting regarding unresolved matters from the divorce, financial discrepancies, emotional damages, and restitution Marcus had avoided in his rush to erase her from his life. Marcus almost didn't show, but he did. They met in a quiet office. No audience. No spectacle. Grace entered calmly, dressed simply, carrying herself with the same dignity she had shown in the parking lot. Marcus looked smaller now, older, worn. He did not meet her eyes at first. Grace spoke clearly, without malice. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. "I am here to close a chapter truthfully." She laid out the facts, the costs she had borne, the damage done, the accountability owed. Marcus tried to interrupt. Grace did not raise her voice. She did not insult him. She did not smile. She simply told the truth. When she finished, the room was silent. Marcus swallowed hard. "I didn't think you'd end up like this," he muttered. Grace looked at him then, really looked. "I didn't end up like this," she said gently. "I grew into this." He had no response. The settlement was agreed upon quietly. Grace walked out lighter than she had walked in. That night, she told Nathaniel everything. He listened, then took her hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. Grace smiled, not because she had won, but because she had healed. She understood now that revenge was loud, fleeting, and hollow, but truth was steady. Healing was powerful. Grace was not restored by Marcus's downfall, nor defined by Nathaniel's wealth. She was whole because she chose to be. Somewhere, Marcus Cole was learning the cost of pretending. And Grace Ellis, once discarded, once humiliated, was living proof that dignity outlives cruelty and that grace, when chosen, always has the final word.